Pros, save more on the materials you need to get the job done inside and out at Lowe's. Right now, get 10% off in-stock Trex Naturals decking, now available in more styles. Plus, get 15% off select custom entry, interior, and storm doors. Then, we'll deliver it all straight to your job site to help keep your jobs moving. Get the brands pros trust, priced right, and ready when you need them. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 5/27. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. On the night of April 2nd, 1865, as Union forces broke through Confederate lines at Petersburg and Richmond began to burn, a train slipped out of the Confederate capital in the darkness. On board was the entire treasury of the Confederate States of America: gold coins, silver bullion, Mexican silver dollars, foreign currency even. A total value has been estimated at anywhere between $500,000 and several million dollars in 1865 money, a sum worth tens of millions by today's measure. It was loaded onto the train under the supervision of Confederate Treasury Secretary John C. Breckinridge and the naval officer assigned to guard it, Commander William Parker. The train headed south, and somewhere between Richmond, Virginia, and the end of the Confederacy 6 weeks later, most of the gold disappeared. Where it went has never been definitively established. Our history brief today highlights a past History Shorts conversation episode with author James Cheshire. A quick word from our sponsors.
We're almost halfway through the year, and a lot of people are running on empty without fully realizing it. Grow Therapy helps you find care that's covered by insurance before burnout becomes the baseline. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. They connect you with thousands of independent licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. And if something comes up, you can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Grow accepts over 100 insurance plans, including Medicaid in some states. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/booknow to get started. That's growtherapy.com/booknow. growtherapy.com/booknow. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
This day in history. On May 27, 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge opened to the public in San Francisco, quickly becoming one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world and a symbol of American engineering. On May 27, 1999, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia indicted Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic for war crimes, marking one of the first times a sitting head of state faced international prosecution. Story of the day. By April of 1865, the Confederate government had ceased to function in any meaningful sense. President Jefferson Davis was fleeing south with what remained of his cabinet, a government in exile moving by train and then by horse, pursued by Union cavalry, making decisions under conditions of extreme stress and physical exhaustion. The gold train followed Davis's flight southward through Danville, Virginia, then into North Carolina, and then into South Carolina, and finally into Georgia. At each stop, portions of the treasury were dispersed. Soldiers were paid, and some of them partially at least. Local Confederate officials received funds as well. The naval midshipmen guarding the gold were themselves paid off and dismissed at various points along the train route. By the time the remnants of the treasury reached Washington, Georgia, a small town that served as the Confederacy's last functioning capital for just a matter of days, people actually forget this, the original sum had been significantly reduced. How much remained and what happened to it next is where this mystery begins in earnest. Jefferson Davis was captured by Union cavalry in Georgia on May 10th, 1865. He had very little money on him when he was taken. The Confederate government was finished, but the accounting of what had happened to the Treasury was deeply incomplete. Competing claims, contradictory records, and the deliberate destruction of documents by Confederate officials fleeing Union capture made a precise reconstruction impossible by then, and impossible now. The most documented portion of what happened involves a distribument that took place at or near Shannock Plantation in Lincoln County, Georgia, in May of 1865. According to various accounts, a significant portion of the remaining Confederate gold, estimates range from about $100,000 to several $100,000, was then divided among Confederate officials and officers, ostensibly for safekeeping or for future use in continuing the Confederate cause. Some of this money was later recovered by Union forces or surrendered voluntarily. Most of it, however, was not. The theories about what happened to the missing gold are quite numerous, persistent, and in several cases mutually contradictory. The most romantic theory, and the one that has driven the most treasure hunters into Georgia countryside, holds that a significant cache of Confederate gold was buried somewhere in Lincoln County or the surrounding area, hidden by Confederate officers who intended to retrieve it later, but just never did. This theory has inspired decades of excavation, metal detection, and in at least one documented case, a legal dispute over mineral rights on private land that ended in federal court. No cache of Confederate gold has ever been officially confirmed as found, I should say. Another theory, and the one that most historians find most persuasive, is considerably less cinematic. It holds that the gold was not buried at all. It was simply spent, stolen, or distributed piecemeal by the dozens of Confederate officers and officials who had access to it during the chaotic final weeks of the flight. In the confusion of a collapsing government, with no funding oversight, no intact chain of command, and no accountability mechanism of any kind, the Treasury was simply consumed by the entropy of defeat. Men took what they could. Some of it funded escapes to Brazil, Mexico, or other countries where Confederate exiles established communities after the war. Some of it founded post war lives in the American South. Some of it, almost certainly, was simply pocketed by individuals whose names are not in the historical record. There is a third theory, though, specific and documented enough to deserve its own mention. A portion of the Confederate treasury, approximately $86,000 in gold coins, was seized by a group of Union soldiers near the town of Shannock Plantation shortly after Davis's capture. The soldiers, members of the 1st Ohio Cavalry, are documented to have taken that gold. What happened to it after, that is disputed. Some was recovered by Union authorities. The remainder was, however, never fully accounted for. Whether those soldiers buried it, spent it, or carried it home, that is a question that produced lawsuits and investigations in the years immediately after the war, and produced no satisfying resolution. The legend of the Confederate gold has proven considerably more durable than the Confederacy itself. It has inspired novels, films, and an industry of treasure hunting that has never entirely gone away. The state of Georgia has periodically issued permits for excavation in areas associated with the gold's route and has occasionally had to deal with the legal and environmental consequences of enthusiastic amateur excavators digging up private and public land on the basis of theories that range from the plausible to the entirely made up. In 2018, the FBI excavated a site in Dents Run, Pennsylvania, not directly connected to the Confederate treasury story, but part of the broader American tradition of lost Civil War gold legends. And FBI found nothing. The Confederate gold, in its various forms, remains officially unrecovered. The honest historical answer to what happened to the Confederate treasury is probably this: most of it was dispersed, distributed, stolen, or spent during the final chaotic weeks of the Confederacy's existence. The people who had access to it had every incentive to take what they could and no incentive to keep records. A smaller portion may indeed be buried somewhere in the Georgia, of Virginia, or even Carolina countryside, but the odds that it has survived undiscovered for 160 years in a region that has been extensively developed, farmed, and searched are not high. The mystery persists not because the gold is necessarily still out there, it persists because the possibility that it might be is more compelling than any definite answer. The History Brief. The full conversation you're about to hear with James Cheshire, the author of The Library of Lost Maps, can be found wherever you're listening to this episode.
Or at least, how do you define a culture and how do you map it? And these were the maps that were then used in the Paris Peace Conference to help inform the borders at the end of the war. And they called it a scientific peace because they said that this was a scientific approach. And so during those negotiations, we then see how some countries were much more effective at communicating the different kind of views of where they thought the border should be than others. But there's a famous example of a map of Hungary called the Carte Rouge, the red map. And it was one of the first to use this kind of blood red color right on the center of the map to show the extent of the Hungarian population as was, to help define the country's borders after the war. That's exactly the thing that catches their eye and gets their attention and starts the conversation. These ethnographic maps became incredibly influential. They were very flawed, of course, because how do you define a national identity is actually a really hard question. Is it based on someone's religion, based on their language, based on their political views, based on their ancestry? There's all these questions that were sometimes contradictory when they were mapped.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping to make this little show such a mighty success. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both of those links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, where we have different series that are not part of this main feed and where you could watch the Friday Conversation series episodes on video. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.